All right, we are now live.
Hello, I'm Gwen Whistler, the Chair of the Finance and Human Resources Committee, and I'd like to welcome you to the August 18th remote meeting. All council committee members and staff are participating virtually. We appreciate your patience as we work through holding these committee meetings a bit differently. Although not really that differently these days, we've been virtual for a long time. To help our audience follow along, I'll state each section of the agenda aloud. We are streaming live on our Virtual Engagement Hub, which is accessible through the Virtual Engagement Hub link on the front page of the city's website. We also have an option for the public to listen live by phone. For those of you out there with us today, welcome. For today's meeting, we have the option for people to call in and comment live during the meeting. To call in and comment live, use the same number, 855-925-2801, meeting code 5257. Your phone will be muted and you will hear the meeting live. At this point, speakers will need to push *3 to enter the speaker queue. I'll now go through and introduce the committee members and some of the city staff that are participating virtually. Please make sure to mute your microphone if you are not speaking. When you would like to speak, unmute your microphone. Please remember to remute your microphone after speaking. Council and staff, as I call your name, please say a quick hello. Councilwoman Sandra Kilgore.
Hello.
Councilwoman Sage Turner.
Good afternoon.
City Manager Deborah Campbell.
Hello.
Assistant City Manager Kathy Ball.
Good afternoon.
Interim Assistant City Manager Peggy Rowe.
Hello.
Great. So we have other staff that are participating, but I'll introduce them as we go through the agenda. So to help our audience follow along, again, I'll state each section of the agenda aloud and do a vocal roll call for each vote. I don't know that there's actually a vote today, but additionally, I ask that committee members raise their hand to speak and I'll call on them. Our first item is proposed fee adjustments for advertising on the Asheville Rides transit buses. I'll turn it over to Assistant Transportation Director Jessica Morris to discuss this item. There you go, Jessica. Looks like she's frozen. Oh, okay. All right. You're muted, Jessica.
Okay, sorry about that. You probably think that you're having deja vu because we did in fact update the transit fees for advertising on city buses back in April as part of a larger package that the finance department brought forward to update various fees. And what this is fixing what was inadvertently incorrect information in the previous approval. We only included a small portion of what we really intended to include for transit advertising fees. So essentially what you see before you is meant to fix that mistake and
Hold on, incorrect. Beth, nothing is showing on my screen. Are you sharing Jessica's presentation?
No, she's just talking through this one.
Oh, okay. I thought she just referenced something. Okay.
So in your agenda packet, you should have a document, a staff report, and an attachment that shows the proposed fees and the fees that were previously in place. I didn't include the erroneous fees that were approved and went into effect in July, but I just recently updated the council report. So when this goes to council, those will be included as well. But essentially, those erroneous fees really have only been in place since July 1st, and no, we haven't had any applicants for advertising on transit. So this shouldn't affect anyone. But what we intended to have approved and adopted as part of this fee update included, I would say, modest increases based on what we saw other agencies incorporating, and more flexibility and more options for folks that may wish to advertise with us on transit. This is a very, very small revenue source for transit, but we're hoping that maybe some of these changes will provide more incentive for folks to look at this as an option for advertising. So what we're looking from you today is a recommendation to approve the proposed or a recommendation for this to move forward to council to approve the proposed fees. And this would be an ordinance amendment, or a new ordinance, I should say, that would replace the old one and would go into effect immediately upon adoption. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Council, is there any questions? Council members? Okay, I would entertain a motion to move this, to adopt this and move it forward for adoption by City Council.
I'll second.
Okay, so I'll do a roll call vote. Councilwoman Kilgore?
Yes. Aye.
Councilwoman Turner?
Aye.
And I'm an aye. Great, thank you. Appreciate it, Jessica.
Thanks, bye.
The next item of business is a CFO update from our Finance Director, Tony McDowell. You're muted, Tony. Won't it be nice when we never say that again the rest of our lives?
I
We
know.
never say, you're muted.
Yeah. Although I do like being in more casual clothes as I'm presenting to you all. That is one of the benefits of this. But good afternoon, Tony McDowell, Finance Director. As Councilmember Whistler indicated, the next item on the agenda is the CFO update. And there's actually 4 kind of sub-bullet points under the CFO update. The first of which is a discussion of a regular meeting time. I think, as you all know, the Finance Committee has sort of been in hiatus since the pandemic started. I think you all met once back in April to talk about fee adjustments, that meeting that Jessica just referenced. So we wanted to start today by talking to you all about what might be a good meeting time, meeting frequency moving forward. So with that, I'll turn it back over to you, Councilmember Whistler, for that discussion.
Do either of the, so typically we have been meeting well, not really consistently now that I see.
Yeah, the original time way back when was the 4th Tuesday right before council at 3:30. And I looked back over the years, and almost like 85% of the time we had to move that for a work session. So I wouldn't necessarily recommend that time.
Right. Beth, can you put that slide up?
Yep.
One that shows where the other committee meetings are?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay, I don't know about anyone else, but I sort of like to keep these committee meetings either in the 2nd or the 4th week. Just, in the event that you can actually ever go on vacation when you're on council, you get a week that doesn't have a committee meeting. I would, Sage, do you have a problem with Mondays? I thought that you might have issues with Mondays. Sage? Councilwoman Turner?
Looks like we lost her. I don't.
Yeah, and apparently I just lost Sandra too, so, We'll see whether they can join back in.
Mm-hmm. There's Sandra.
Okay. Now, how about Sage? Oh, there we
Coming
go.
on.
There you go. Sage, are you the one who likes to have your Mondays available and not council, not schedule meetings?
If possible, yes.
Okay.
And sorry, I had a tech issue there, something dropped.
Yeah, I figured that. And our work sessions usually start when? Around 3?
Yeah, depending on how much time we need, they've ranged from 2:30 to 3:30.
Yeah.
I think most of the budget ones started at 2:30.
Pardon?
I think most of the budget ones started at 2:30.
Right. Right.
And I don't know. I mean, we have none on Wednesdays and Thursdays. I don't know if that's intentional for most people's schedules, but
Right.
if you're thinking about staying to the second and fourth weeks,
The only issue is if you have it on Wednesday, then, you're automatically, I mean, we can't ever do anything that day of kind of thing. It kind of needs to be before, I think. Do any of the other council members have a preference for setting up the finance?
I don't have a preference, Gwen, I'm fine.
Okay. Why don't we say the 4th Tuesday, and we'll say at 1. Public safety is usually over in 2 hours, right? That puts that makes a tough day for you, Sandra, especially if we have a work session. That means you'll pretty much be, in meetings from 11 in the morning until 11 at night. Are you okay with that?
That's fine.
Okay, so we'll say the 4th Tuesday at 1. And then, we don't have a problem canceling if we don't have things on the agenda, so.
sounds good. I'll get everything updated.
Okay, thank you. Back to you, Tony.
Thank you all. So the next 2 bullet items under the CFO report, I'm going to combine into kind of one discussion here, and that's introduction of some of our new staff in the finance department, or in particular, one new staff member, and also kind of an overview of our finance department functions and our organizational structure. And I wanted to cover this today. I know we have kind of a light agenda and we haven't met in a while, and Councilmember Kilgore and Councilmember Turner are both new to the committee. So I wanted to kind of give you all an introduction to the finance department and what we do. I know you all hear from us a lot during the budget process. You're very familiar with that, and the journey that we take you all along as we go through the budget. And a little bit familiar probably with hearing us talk about the year-end audit and the comprehensive financial report that we do. But there's a lot of other things the finance department does as well. So I want to introduce some key staff and kind of show you all the organizational structure as well. Beth, if you could pull up that PDF that I sent you, I'll start there. And I apologize, I am not a org chart whiz, and so this is something that was created in Google Sheets. We're working on putting together a better one that has names and titles and all that. But for the purposes today, I think this works. And so this kind of gives you an overview of what the finance department looks like. We have 32 positions in our department and kind of 4 key areas that report up to me as the department director. And so the first one I want to start with, and each one of the kind of key reports here are going to introduce themselves and kind of talk through with you what they do in their areas. But I want to start with the new staff, and I'm going to use air quotes when I say new, because our new assistant finance director for accounting services is actually not new. She is returning to the city after leaving to go to the county for about a year. But prior to that, she was with us as our controller here at the city. Becky King has joined us. I think as last Monday was her first day back at the city. And she's filling the role of the assistant director. It's the one that's in the light blue on the org chart there. And it was the assistant director position was the one that I held before becoming the department director. And at that point, it was an assistant director that was focused on budget. And when Barbara was here, Barbara's background was more in finance. She'd been a controller. And so I thought that her and I working together, her as kind of the accounting expert, me on the budget side, really balanced things out well. And so as we began recruiting for an assistant director, I was really looking for someone who could provide that balance that we had when Barbara was here. So with that, I'll let Becky introduce herself and kind of talk a little bit about herself and the area that she's over.
Thanks, Tony. Yes, so I am Becky King. I was formerly the controller for the city of Asheville I think I held that position, for about 2.5 years. Prior to that, I was an accountant for the city. So I learned a lot during that time. I did leave for about a year, went and worked for the county. I was the accounting and reporting manager over there. So have been in government for about 5 years. Before that, I was the finance manager for a nonprofit here in Asheville. So honestly, I have done accounting since college and I love it. And honestly, I'm very excited to be back working with the city and the city's finance department. So I oversee the financial operations and the financial reporting functions of finance. The operations side are payroll, accounts receivable, accounts payable, debt, cash management, and I think that's the majority of the things that they take care of. The reporting side, honestly, they do more of the background things for the city. So grant reporting, our P-card program also sits under the financial reporting side of things. They take care of the annual audit, the annual financial statements that we produce, fixed assets, bank reconciliations, and all of the other kind of behind the scenes things that happen for the finance department. So, Tony, do you want me to talk about audit stuff, or are we going to wait on that?
Let's come back to that. Well, we'll go around and introduce other folks first. So, and thanks, Becky. I'll look on the org chart and go right and go to Taylor. I think you all know Taylor from the budget, but I'll let Taylor kind of talk a little bit about his division and what's going on there right now.
Thanks, Tony. As I think you all are aware, the budget division primarily supports the development of the city's budget through the annual budget process. And then we also help departments as they manage their budgets throughout the fiscal year. Right now, we're kind of in the planning stages for our next budget process. We got the budget document done. That's kind of the last little piece of the FY22, the current year budget year, and now it's on to FY23. So the planning starts. We've been working over the last couple of years with CAPE and equity, data, and performance. We're going to continue that plan, trying to grow our community engagement that we've been doing around the budget, and continue to work with departments to help better incorporate equity into decision-making and service delivery needs. So that's kind of at a very high level, what we're trying to work towards as we start to plan the budget this year. Probably the next thing that you'll see from us, if you recall from our last budget process, we mentioned a review of services for sanitation and stormwater, which feels timely right now. So we're going to work with Public Works on those two. So you should hopefully be seeing that sometime before the end of the calendar year. One more thing I'll mention is since Tony's on to bigger and better things than just budget. And we had another staff member get a promotion internally in the city, which is great for her. So we're actually hiring 2 new staff, and hopefully we'll have them on in the next couple months.
All right. Thanks, Taylor. Brad, do you mind going next?
Sure. Sounds great. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Brad Stein. I'm the city risk manager and the Title II ADA coordinator. And as you see on the org chart, the risk management division is part of finance. We have 5 total FTE assigned to the risk division. 2 of those are liability claims adjusters, licensed adjusters handling claims that arise against the city. And I'll explain a little bit about that. And also 2 kind of OSHA safety officers, dedicated safety personnel who champion our OSHA compliant program citywide as a centralized function. So some of the main program kind of aspects of the risk division at the city are really a self-insured claim program. So for liability claims and for workers' compensation, we are self-insured. And that's why we're probably part of the finance department here. I've served here about 9.5 years, and I've worked as a risk manager in other municipalities and school districts. And I've been in the city manager's office. I've been in an HR department. But here at the city, because we're handling these funds to settle claims, and we also write all the insurance for excess insurance and large exposure to the city. A lot of funds are handled in risk, so we're part of the finance department here. So we really optimize great service for claims, like when a citizen member asserts a claim against the city, whether it be a property damage claim or a bodily injury claim that they say the city is responsible for. We have folks in-house here, city employees, who are responding to those claims and really provide great service to the citizenry. And we also control costs by doing that. By handling every claim really in-house and on our own, we really save a lot of money strategically in insurance costs. So we manage that program, the Self-Insured Claim Fund program. We administer all the other insurance, like excess insurance for catastrophic claims, whether it be those liability claims, workers' compensation claims that may arise, dam liability insurance for our water system, all these other exposures the city has. The city's risk management office also ensures that we have insurance coverage for that. And we also advise a lot of other risk kind of advisory services citywide. We work with every department, and so we're kind of unique, and it's really fun and dynamic. We provide all these kind of special project services. We review every contract and approve that, also citywide, so to make sure all the terms of the contract and the insurance terms and the evidence of contractors' insurance is valid, so that when folks come and do work on behalf of the city, should something go wrong, the city's interests are protected, and we transfer that risk to that contractor responsible for the work they're doing. So we review all those contracts and advise staff citywide on their contract provisions. And we also help the outdoor special event program kind of review every applicant. So anyone wanting to do an event on city property, Risk also advises and works cross-functionally with that review team to make sure that the events are going to be conducted safely. And if folks need insurance to do their activities on city property, that we validate that too, again, to protect our interests and ultimately the public's interest too. So that's kind of the overview, the 3 to 5 minute summary of risk.
Thanks, Brad.
Sure.
And last but definitely not least, Frank McGowan, our Finance Strategic Services Manager.
Good afternoon. I'm Frank McGowan, the Financial and Strategic Services Manager. I've been with the city for 13 years, 8 with finance and 5 with parks, and I report to Tony. I lead a team of 8 people. I supervise strategic services, which encompasses purchasing, agreements, and grants compliance, and business services administration. I also work on special projects, cross-functional teams, and interdepartmental collaborations. And additionally, I review and sign a lot of contracts and agreements as a CFO designee for Tony. The business services administration portion has 2 staff members. Most importantly, they provide support to the Finance and Human Resources Committee. They also manage contracting, purchasing, and administration for the department. And I will mention Beth has done a fantastic job for us in this area, but she is moving over to communications full-time. She's been doing 2 jobs basically for a while. So we are recruiting currently for I can't even say a new Beth. There is no other Beth, but we're looking for a replacement for that position. We also have partnerships and grants compliance. We have 1 staff person there. They maintain a record of all partnerships and agreements. They review financial and programmatic compliance, expirations, renewals, and coordinate with the departments to maintain those agreements. And when the help is needed, they will draft new agreements and get them approved and executed. Lastly, the purchasing division has a team of 5 purchasing professionals. We have 4 certified local government purchasing officers, and that's a rigorous purchasing certification offered by UNC School of Government. Our 5th member of the team will be testing for their certification in March. So soon we'll have an entire team that are certified professional or purchasing professionals. That division is responsible for fulfilling the procurement needs of all departments following state statute, city policy, and federal guidelines. The authority for purchases is delegated to the purchasing manager. And while contracting is decentralized to the departments, purchasing advises on bid process, manages bid advertisement, reviews compliance with statute and policy, and completes all the administrative functions related to contracting. They're also responsible for the disposal of surplus, and we use an online disposal, or we use an online vendor to help us dispose of surplus, but anything valued over $30,000 goes to council for authorization for disposal. They also advise on grant-funded projects and purchases to ensure compliance with grant guidelines, especially state and federal requirements. And this is becoming even more important as we have $26 million of American Rescue Plan Act funding that will be dispersed over the next several years. Thank you.
And I promise we didn't rehearse this, but that's a great lead in, the rescue plan. There's one position that's not shown on our org chart, and that's because it is new. We actually just started recruiting for it last week, but it is a position, a time-limited position to help us manage the American Rescue Plan dollars over the next 3 to 5 years. I think, as you all know, Patricia Rosenberg has been wearing 2 hats in addition to her internal audit duties. She's she has been our ARPA manager for the last few months. We are going to be hiring a position that will be in the finance department that will take over responsibilities for that in the next few months. So if you all know someone out in the world looking for that type of opportunity, please point them to our website. So before you kind of talk briefly about the audit that's coming up, and I'm going to let Becky talk about that. Any questions or comments about the department and the services that we provide?
I have one question. How does the purchasing department work with our new policy around making sure that we are giving opportunities and for minority and women-owned businesses?
So to answer your question, the Asheville Business Inclusion Office has their own policy. Council recently approved an update to the purchasing policy so that we are ensuring that any contract that is processed is following our Asheville Business Inclusion guidelines. So it's up to each department to do their respective outreach. What we are doing on the sort of the back end, I like to say we're kind of playing catcher or backstop. They are verifying that the necessary ABI paperwork has been submitted, and if we're not seeing it in a contract, we kick it back and make sure that the outreach has been done to the satisfaction of the ABI office.
Thank you. Council, do you have any questions?
The only thing I'd like to say is, Tony, I really appreciate this oversight that you've given me. It just sort of puts the pieces in place, whereas before, I didn't have it at least, but I really appreciate it, and it's helped me understand the whole process a lot better. Thank you.
Yeah, well, thank you for that feedback, and that's exactly what we wanted to hear. I mean, you all, as I mentioned when I started talking, you all hear us and see us a lot during the budget process. You hear us a little bit at the end of the audit process, but there's a whole lot we're doing every day. Something I think Frank coined the term silent running, where we're paying vendors and we're paying employees and we're executing contracts and we're dealing with our risk exposure. So there's a lot going on that you all never really see and hear about. So we wanted to take the opportunity to talk to you all about that. So, that was Doug. Okay, sorry, I'll give credit where credit's due. That was Doug, not Frank. But anyway, yeah. If there's no other questions on the org structure, I'll let Becky kind of walk you all through where we are with the year-end audit process.
So, year-end audit. Like Tony said, I think today is my 7th day, so I'm trying to get caught up with everything related to the year-end audit. But I will give you guys kind of an update. So this week, we are working to get our general ledger closed for fiscal year 21. So we use Munis. So there's a lot of coordination between all of the different departments, all of the different divisions within finance to make sure we have a smooth close. We're doing some testing right now, and it is our hope that Friday evening, at the end of business, we will go ahead and close the fiscal year. That is really important so that the financial reporting and honestly, kind of everybody, but the financial reporting division takes the lead on this, is able to do reconciliations and work papers to get to the auditors so that we are ready for them to come and do final field work. We're finishing up a couple things from our preliminary field work with them. There were a couple of outstanding items that we are getting to them right now. And then we will start digging into all of our accounts to make sure they balance the way they should. It is our plan to get a trial balance to them the beginning of September. They will be on site to do final field work the weeks of September 20th and 27th. And so I know that we had a couple of findings last year. So I have talked with multiple people on our auditor staff about those issues and how we can make sure they do not happen again this year. And I will be keeping a very close watch on all of those items as we kind of progress through the audits this year to make sure that we don't have those same findings this year. We are also, I believe Tony has mentioned, we are working with JPS. It is a local accounting firm here in Asheville, and they're kind of helping us get through this process, giving us some feedback, some guidance on things that we want to just make sure that we look at. And we have also hired a temp employee to kind of help with workload on both the operations and the reporting side of things. So after discussions with the auditors, we are going to try our best to meet our October 31st deadline. That is my goal. I'm not a huge fan of pushing it off because it just gets pushed farther off into the year that we need to be working on currently. So as of right now, we are looking good for October 31st. Any questions?
Council, any questions? Yeah, I'd be a big fan of no reporting from the auditors other than cleanliness. So welcome back, Becky. Going to the county, it's always a slippery slope. So welcome back.
Thank you. And Glenn, it is my plan to not have any findings. Like I said, I'm on day 7 and I'm trying to dig into things. So, but I'm going to do my best to get us through with a clean audit this year.
Great.
And we'll definitely be back and give you all updates over the next couple months as we continue working through it.
Thank you, everyone.
Any more on the update, Tony?
No, I think that's it. I think we can move on to the next item on the agenda. And again, because we did have a kind of a light agenda this time, and we spent some time talking with you all about the structure of our department and everything. The last thing we wanted to talk about, and I'll turn it over to Doug Whitman, our treasurer, to talk about our debt overview, just to kind of give you all a presentation, kind of an introduction to our debt program. You all have seen at the council level a couple of actions over the last 6 months or so related to our debt. I think it was back in April or so, and I'm sure Doug will have this in his presentation. You all approved us issuing our latest debt for our capital improvement program, our LOBs and our SOBs, our limited obligation bonds, our special obligation bonds. And then we're getting ready to come back to you all again with some actions in the next few meetings for us to issue some debt for a water project, the water treatment plant upgrades that was recently completed. And so I thought it'd be a good opportunity for us to kind of give you all maybe we wouldn't call it a deep dive, but a medium-sized dive anyway on our debt program. Let you all answer any questions that you may have of us about our program. So with that, I'll turn it over to Doug.
Great. Thanks, Tony. So I'm Doug Whitman. I work in finance as the treasurer for the city. I've been with the city for about 3 years now and have really enjoyed that. As Tony was saying, we are going to be issuing some 30-year bonds for the water department, water revenue bonds. And you will have already seen in your committees or in council meetings kind of requests for approval of that. And we will be going to issue those bonds at the end of September. And as Tony and I were talking about this, again, just to reiterate what Tony was saying, was it might be a good idea to take a few minutes, 10 or 15 minutes, to kind of take a step back and go through our overall debt program. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to talk about the objectives of the debt program, what expenditures the city has for certain for debt funding. And then we're going to talk about 3 areas of debt. It really does boil down to 3 different types of debt that we issue. That takes up about 99% of the debt we have on our books. What we'll start with then is on the debt objectives. A lot of these are pretty intuitive. What we want to do as a city is smooth out cash flows. What I'm going to do during this discussion is use an example throughout all of this, and it is our 30-year bonds that are coming up. So in 2018, the Water Department started undertaking a project for the North Fork Dam. The North Fork Dam provides something like 75 to 80% of the water for the city. It is very important to the city, and it was going to spend about $40 million over a 3-year period to enhance the embankments, the spillway, various things. But that $40 million over a 3-year period really represented a spike in capital spending to what the Water Department would typically do from year to year. So this became a very good candidate for our debt program, and to then layer out over a 30-year period the capital costs of the North Fork Dam project. The other point on smoothing out cash flows that the city does that is really a saver for expense is we borrow funds only as we are spending those. What I'll do as an example is on the North Fork Dam, other municipalities may have taken out a loan or issued bonds for the full $40 million at the start of the project. Then what they would do is they would typically put that into a bank account or an account of some sort, and as vendors needed to be paid, they would pay that out of the account. What the city does instead is it puts in place a note, a bond anticipation note, and we draw down only as funds are spent. In fact, we wait until funds are spent, and then we draw down and reimburse ourselves. So by doing that, we kind of eliminate spikes both on the expenditure side, but also bringing in spikes of huge amounts of cash and then kind of paying them out. We also follow a matching technique. So what that means is the value of the North Fork Dam, that will be valuable to us for the next several decades. So the thinking is we should be paying for that over the same time frame as the asset life itself. And what you could argue kind of theoretically is the citizens who are enjoying that, the North Fork Dam, the improvements to it, will be paying through taxes over an extended period of time. We also then, as part of our objectives, is to always seek out the lowest funding costs. So we do that by staying in the capital markets. And what that simply means is on any given year or every other year, we're going to be issuing bonds. So the capital markets, investors nationwide know the name City of Asheville. And in fact, we have a high rating. For our general obligations, it's AAA, which is the very highest you can have. In the example I've been using for water bonds, we are AA1. So again, very highly rated. Other forms of debt we use are for bank loans, basically. And we use a very competitive bank bidding system. And I think this is an important point. Not only do we go to money center banks like Bank of America or Wells Fargo, But we also include local banks, banks like Home Trust. And we will go out to them and each one of them very transparently, and we will say, this is the bond anticipation note, or this is the 5-year equipment loan that we are thinking about. And we will have those banks bidding on those, knowing that all of our relationship banks that we have, half a dozen of them, are going to be very competitive in the pricing. So that's how we keep our pricing or our costs, our interest rates low. Okay, Beth, if you don't mind. So again, before we jump into kind of the 3 areas of debt, one thing that I wanted to do was simply walk through what types of expenditures can we use debt for. So first and foremost, debt cannot be used for the city's operating costs, but they can be used for capital expenditures. So Tony was talking about the capital improvement plan, the annual budget process where we get approval for a certain amount of capital spend. Well, that capital spend can actually be funded through debt, as we're going to talk about, but also pay-as-you-go funding and grants, federal grants, state grants. So when the city takes a step back and is trying to determine what is the appropriate level of debt that we should have, what you should know is behind the scenes, the finance department and its financial advisors have modeled kind of multi-year projected cash flows, not just the annual budget, but looking out 2, 3, 5 years. And as we're looking out at that, and we're including things like anticipated revenues and expenses and capital outlays, then we get a sense of how much we can fund these capital programs through debt. And by modeling that, we can see what kind of debt ratios we need to maintain. And also by doing that, it helps us then talk to the rating agencies and maintain these really high debt ratings, like AAA and AA ratings. Okay? Any questions so far? Be happy to answer any questions, or I'm happy to also kind of keep going with this overview. Okay, thanks. I'll keep going. Okay, Beth, if you don't mind. So I really wanted to streamline this. Our debt programs, it really boils down to 3. What we're going to do is we're going to talk briefly about each one of these 3, and then I'll give you a sense of how much debt we have in each one of these programs. So the very first one is called a bond anticipation note, or a BAN. The second is refunding bonds, and then the third is equipment loans. If you walk away with kind of a rule of thumb, if you will, our total debt program, thanks Beth, our total debt program is about $190 million. The bond anticipation notes represent maybe about $40 to $50 million. The refunding bonds, maybe about $125 million, and then the equipment loans, the rest. The vast majority, though, or the big ticket items, are through the refunding bonds. So now I'll talk a little bit more in detail about the 3 different programs. Okay, so what is a bond anticipation note? That is really a loan with a bank. It is a line of credit. And if you think of it this way, we will go out to various banks, we bid everything competitively, and we will tell them, and I'll use the North Fork Dam as an example. In 2017 and going into 2018, we knew we had a really good estimate that we were going to spend approximately $40 million. We went to banks and we said, we want to take out a line of credit for an amount not to exceed $40 million, and we want to be able to draw that down over a 3-year period. So we get 4 or 5 different banks to compete on this. It is a variable interest rate because the banks are giving us a lot of flexibility as and when we draw down on this loan. We also set a timeline. We knew that the North Fork Dam would take approximately 3 years. So this bond anticipation note likewise is about 3 years. And so again, as we were spending money from 2018 all the way through 2021, we would draw down on this loan as the city was spending money. And what I can tell you is, as of early 2021, we've drawn down the full $40 million. Okay? So Beth, if you don't mind, This will just give you some sense. Okay, so I keep using the water ban as an example. We had a not to exceed amount of $40 million. We drew down $40 million. It is a variable rate loan. And here's what's really, I think, interesting is because interest rates are so low, variable rates are usually tied to either LIBOR or SIFMA. Those are just acronyms in the market. LIBOR is being phased out. SIFMA is being kind of phased in. But if you look at that on our water bans, we're currently paying about 40 basis points. So less than 0.5% are we paying on that bond anticipation note. Having said that, though, if interest rates were to go back up, then the interest cost would go up as well. We also have an outstanding general obligation bond ban, and the not to exceed amount is $25 million. We put it in place in 2020, and it will last until 2023. And it's funding various projects that have to do with parks and recreation, transportation, and public housing. Okay, so as a rule of thumb, maybe about $50 million or so currently in bond anticipation notes. Okay, Beth, if you would, thanks. So then the second of these three programs are refunding bonds, and these are the long-term bonds. These can either be GOs, LOBs, SOBs, or water, and those are acronyms. And in the next slide, I'm going to talk a little bit about what those acronyms are and why we have those. The funding source is we use an underwriter. In the case of the water, the North Fork Dam, we're using an underwriter, Bank of America Securities. So they're going out marketing these bonds to the capital markets, and we hope to then close on that at the end of September. These will all be fixed rate. So it's actually a very good time to be locking in bonds. Fixed rate rates are incredibly low. Basically, the term is from 20 to 30 years, and we pay principal every 6 months, principal and interest. Now, the reason we do this is it goes back to one of our objectives of matching kind of the asset life to the debt payments. So a lot of these assets, like the North Fork Dam, will have a useful life of decades, 10, 20, 30 years. Okay, so Beth, if you would. So I walked you through a few of those acronyms, and it's really not perhaps as complicated or detailed as you may think. It's actually fairly straightforward. So we talked a little bit about those bond anticipation notes. That's really a bank loan. It's a contractual agreement between ourselves and a bank. Okay, so what's a general obligation bond? Well, when you're an investor, what you're counting on is the full taxing power of the city. So all the revenue that the city brings in, it can be used to pay off the general obligation bonds. And as I said a little bit earlier, that debt rating, both from Moody's and Standard & Poor's, is AAA rated, the very highest. So we get very low interest cost for that. A limited obligation refunding bond is actually backed by specific assets of the city. So it is City Hall, the City Hall building, the police and fire building, and the Public Works main building. So if you're an investor, we have assessments done on those three assets. If you're an investor, then you know if by chance the city defaults, you have rights to or access to those assets as a backup. And again, very highly rated, AA1. Okay, special obligation bonds. So they're often called SOBs. Those are interesting in that they are, if you're an investor, what is backing those up is the potential tax revenue from economic zones in the city. So the city has 4 economic zones: the downtown, the River Arts District, North Charlotte Street, and the South Slope. And we invest a lot of money into developing those areas. The city has the right actually to put in place additional economic taxes for businesses in those areas. Now, the city has not done that, to be really clear. The city has not done that, but we do have the right to do that. So if you're an investor in special obligation bonds, you know that that's being backed by this kind of special taxing power of the city. And then finally, we've been talking about the water revenue bonds. Those are specifically backed by the revenue of the water department. And then finally, we do have equipment loans, which we'll talk about, and they are backed by a contractual agreement between the city and the bank. Okay, Beth. So this just gives you some sense of, we really do have kind of an ongoing cycle of issuing LOBs and SOBs, GEO debt, and even water refunding bonds. You can see that every year or every other year approximately, we're kind of in the capital markets issuing these bonds. They are fixed rate, so you can see the coupon rates of the various bonds. And you can see that most of them are very long-term in nature, going out 20 and 30 years. And then as a rule of thumb, the current amount outstanding is right about $125 million. Now, at the end of September, when we issue those water revenue bonds, those $40 million worth, those will be added to this list of refunding bonds. So we'll add 40 million to the refunding bonds, but also the bond anticipation notes, those will be reduced by 40 million. We're basically issuing bonds, and the money that we're bringing in from those bonds go towards paying off the BAN, or the bond anticipation note. Okay, Beth, thank you. Okay, the third and final are equipment loans. And this is a little bit different, maybe even a little bit of a hybrid. On an annual basis, the city is purchasing vehicles. The fleet division, fire, police, all are buying vehicles, and the IT group is buying equipment. Now, a vehicle admittedly can last 10 years, but the useful life for the city is right around 5 years or so. And so what the city has done is, on an annual basis, again, we reach out to our core group of banks, and we are looking for a loan. And it's just under 5 years, a loan to pay for the vehicles, the city vehicles and the IT equipment. And because it's going out nearly 5 years, we're looking for a fixed rate that gets competitively bid by these different banks. And again, what is the benefit of this kind of hybrid, if you will? Well, the debt itself is matching the useful life of the asset. So it falls under that matching objective. And Beth, if you don't mind the next slide. What I want to do here is, in some of the early years, 2010, 2013, we actually issued some equipment loans for a longer term, 15 years and 10 years. Since that time, however, we've fallen into the cycle for the matching objective of issuing them for 5 years. So you can see in 2017, we issued we have a loan with Regions Bank that will mature out in 2022. What I want to reemphasize here, though, is you can see for our equipment loans, different banks. And in fact, Home Trust Bank, a local bank that we have a very strong relationship with, in 2018, won the loan. We also have PNC, JP Morgan Chase. So it is a mixture of money center banks and local banks. It's one of the things that the city tries to do. We try to be absolutely transparent, but we also try and embrace using our banking wallet or our banking business for all of the banks, including local banks. We're very committed to that. Okay, and I think that is, so yes, so we've gone over kind of the 3 different programs. I've been talking a lot, throwing in a lot of detail. I'd be happy to answer any questions you might have, or even follow-up questions if you come up with any that you want to ask later.
So, Doug, thank you. So the bans are kind of, for people, it's like a construction loan, right?
Yes.
You draw it down as you're doing construction, and then you roll it into a permanent loan.
That's exactly right. It is used by many different companies, many different organizations. It might be called different things. But you're absolutely right. And it's a way to kind of control your costs. I guess one point on that is, for example, the North Fork Dam. The water department had a very strong handle on how much it was going to spend and when it was going to spend it. It's not that. But there are certain times where weather or other things may play a factor and push out when certain activities, construction or otherwise, can happen. And it's when those things happen that you can say, well, I've got this debt facility in place. I don't need to draw down right now. I can actually draw down later.
Yeah, and you know, one of the advantages, obviously, if you use the bands or the construction loans, is it really does allow you to save on your long-term debt costs over time. And I remember back when I first started in local government 20 plus years ago, if we were doing the North Fork Dam project, then we would have taken out the full $40 million debt at the beginning of the project. And so you would have been paying principal and interest from day one on that project. But as Doug mentioned, with the bands, you're only paying interest on the money that you use. And so that really helps you save and stretch out your debt dollars over time.
So thank you very much.
Sandra, do you have any questions?
I have a question. I hope I understood this right. So with some of those GO bonds that were tied to, say, transportation, the useful life is, I can understand, and has a longer term. What is the useful life for us when we look at like the affordable housing bonds? Over what term does that get assigned? I guess I'm trying to figure out how much of the property tax increased revenue, how long it takes to pay off that bond. What's the useful life of affordable housing?
It's a good question. I guess my initial thought is for affordable housing, a lot of that housing is being set up, or they're using developers for the long term. In other words, to provide this useful or this affordable housing, not just for the next 5 years, but hopefully for the next 10 or even 20 years. Now, I know economic development has to negotiate that with developers, so I couldn't say for certain that it's always kind of a 20-year type of thing. It's very interesting because I think that becomes a little bit more theoretical rather than kind of, okay, I've got this vehicle. But it's a great point. I would think we're certainly going after that objective of matching the useful life. But maybe here and there, especially with affordable housing, it's not kind of as clear cut.
Yeah, and I guess what I'm ultimately getting at is, at what point in time have we sufficiently recovered revenues to pay off that debt to where we could do it again?
It's a great point. And I think we can take away and think about this. I had spoken earlier about kind of this whole modeling exercise. And certainly one thing that kind of is captured into this model is, as you've issued this debt and you're paying down principal and interest, you are kind of then opening yourself up to additional debt, kind of as you're paying off one. And if you're wanting to maintain a certain debt level or debt ratios, you are giving yourself then the flexibility or this ability to then take on additional debt, kind of a rolling type of concept.
Yeah, and here in North Carolina, you can do what Doug's referring to. It's something called 2/3 bonds that allow you to reissue general obligation debt as you're paying it off. Number of larger cities in North Carolina do utilize that. And the reason they're able to do that is because they've had a very active GO bond program over the years. And that's one of the things that kind of hurts us here in Asheville. And I think we've talked to you all some about this before. Prior to this 2016 GO bond, it passed. It was about 30 years or so that we had the previous GO bond that passed, the last one before that. And so we don't have a whole lot of GO bond debt out there right now that's active that we're paying off that we could then utilize to reissue. Some other cities, Charlotte, Raleigh, some of the other larger cities who have active GO bond programs have that money out there that they can kind of continually recycle through their debt program. But maybe we'll get there someday. Did that answer your question, Councilmember Turner?
It does. I have one more, and it's just my finance brain in the weeds. So I really want to understand. So when we voted to approve these bonds and things, then we increased the property tax. Then we started collecting the tax, but we didn't utilize all the bonds right away. So what happens, is there a little bit of growth in that property tax revenue while we're establishing what we're going to do to use the bonds, or in this case, the bands and then the bonds, or does it go through a band period? Did you follow that?
I think so. And then Doug, I'll try to take a stab at this. And this kind of goes back to one of the first slides that Doug talked through, the multi-year planning that we do with our financial consultants. And that's one of the things that they really helped us when we did the GO bond and we were looking at how much that was going to mean in terms of a tax rate increase, the 3.5 cents that we landed at. They modeled that out over 30 years to see how that additional debt for the GO bonds kind of layered in with all of our existing debt and when we were going to pay it off. They also build into their model an assumption of 2% increase every year in the property tax revenue. And so they put all those numbers in a model. And as we move through the next few months, and if we do a capital improvement program kind of update with you all, we'll definitely be showing you all that model and how the debt and the capital all kind of tie together over that. But I think kind of the simple answer to your question, Councilmember Turner, is yes. When we do that modeling and set the tax rate, it is based on an increase in property tax values every year.
Thank you, guys. Very helpful. And Doug, you did a really great job. I appreciate that.
Well, thank you very much. That's really nice feedback. Thank you. And if I may just offer, if any other questions come up, we did kind of go through a lot of detail. I'd be more than happy to answer any other questions.
Thank you. Thank you very much. All right, so the next item is public comments. We did not receive any comments prior to the meeting, so I will go ahead and open it up to public comment. Are there any callers in the speaker queue for live comments, Beth?
There's not.
Unbelievable. You know, I think it's because you guys answered all the questions and made everything very clear. And I'm sure the thousands of people that are listening to this meeting, they don't have any questions now.
No.
But with that said, I will adjourn the meeting. Thank you very much.
Thank you, everyone, for your time today. Appreciate all the information.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.